Peacocks strut through a private Athenian garden, the first ever seen in Europe, a gift from the Persian king to the man who ended a generation of war, a symbol of peace, and yet it hid a problem that would turn a democracy into an empire. To understand those peacocks, we go back to a war that had lasted a generation. Nearly 30 years had passed since Xerxes invaded Greece in 480 BC. 3 decades of fighting followed. Both sides were exhausted. A disastrous Athenian expedition to Egypt ended in catastrophe. Then Cimon led campaigns in Cyprus and died there. After so much blood, people on both sides began cautiously to imagine peace. The endless war against Persia was finally grinding to a halt. Something else had been shifting quietly. The Delian League was an alliance of Greek states formed to fight Persia, its treasury first kept on the island of Delos. Members were meant to supply ships and men, but over the years, most allies chose to send money instead. Cash was easier. As that money flowed to Athens, Athens stopped listening to allied opinion. The relationship changed character. What began as a partnership of equals became protection purchased. Tribute, an annual payment, replaced the shared burden of war, and the one collecting it grew steadily stronger. Enter Callias, one of the richest men in Athens, brother-in-law of Cimon, and head of the hereditary family of heralds. Athens chose him to negotiate. His destination, Susa, the Persian capital, deep in the heart of the empire. He traveled the royal road, the great imperial highway that bound Persia together. The journey took 3 months, 3 months of riding eastward, leaving the Greek coast far behind, to stand before King Artaxerxes and bargain for an end to the war. This was diplomacy measured not in days, but in seasons and in hundreds of miles. The terms drew a line across the world. Persian forces had to stay back from the sea, a 3-day march or a single day's ride from the coast. This created a Persian-free zone all along the shore of Asia Minor. The boundaries were marked at 2 ends, the Chelidonian Rocks near the Eurymedon River in the south, and the Bosphorus near Byzantium in the north. Between them, the Greek coastal cities were safe. In return, the Greeks agreed to stop attacking the king's territory. After a generation of war, the fighting would stop. Callias had won peace, and the peace, it turned out, was a problem. Consider what the Delian League actually was: an alliance built for one purpose, perpetual war against Persia. Every drachma of tribute, every ship, justified by that single threat. Now the threat was gone. The war was over. So what exactly justified the League and all that money piling up in Athens? Pericles had an answer. Eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. A navy is not built once and forgotten. Triremes rot. Crews need constant training and pay. Maintaining a fleet demands enormous, unceasing investment. Let the fleet decay, Pericles argued, and Persia returns in an instant. The peace itself depended on permanent strength. Therefore, the logic was ruthless. The payments cannot stop. The allies cannot leave. Even in peacetime, especially in peacetime, the tribute must keep flowing. Notice what happened here. The defensive alliance had quietly become a permanent system of control. Fear of the old enemy now justified holding the allies forever. One caution before we go further: no complete text of the Peace of Callias survives. Ancient accounts contradict each other, and some scholars even doubt a formal treaty existed. The central provisions are reconstructed, not quoted directly, but the larger pattern is unmistakable. Of roughly 150 allies, only 3 still supplied their own ships and crews: Samos, Chios, and Lesbos. Everyone else paid. The League had become an empire in everything but name, and here the resemblance grows uncomfortable. Athens now gathered annual tribute from its allies exactly as the Persian king gathered it from his provinces. Look closely, and the line between Athens and the empire it once fought begins to vanish. Persia collected tribute from its satrapies, its provinces. Athens collected tribute from its allies. Persia faced revolts. The Ionians, the Babylonians, the Egyptians all rose against their king. Athens too now faced revolts as League members tried to break free. Persia justified its rule with royal power. Athens justified its rule with defense against Persia. Same structure, same resentment, same rebellions. The democracy that had fought to stay free was beginning to look like the empire across the sea. Here is the contradiction at the heart of it all. At home, Athens was a vigorous democracy. Citizens gathered in assembly, debated, and voted. They had fought and bled for their freedom. But abroad, the same Athens ruled as an oppressive imperial power. It demanded tribute. It crushed rebellions. It refused to let its allies leave. One city, two faces. Freedom for ourselves, domination for others. Athens had in a real sense become the very thing it once fought against, and it could no longer tell the difference. So the peacocks in that Athenian garden were the right symbol after all, but not the one anyone intended. They marked the end of one war and the quiet beginning of a deeper crisis. Athens carried the banner of freedom in one hand and the machinery of domination in the other. That tension would not stay hidden. It would grow faster and finally erupt, dragging the whole Greek world into a war Greeks fought against each other. The Peloponnesian War was still years away, but its seed was already planted here in a peace.